Paul Stroud was 34 years old, and on November 18th, 2023, at exactly 7:42 p.m., a waitress he'd never met before handed him a folded napkin that exposed a $847,000 fraud, destroyed his 7-year marriage, and revealed that the woman he loved had been systematically planning his financial destruction for the past 18 months. He sat across from his wife Victoria at the Sterling Oak, an upscale steakhouse on Larimer Street in downtown Denver, trying to salvage what was left of their anniversary celebration. The restaurant was the kind of place where a ribeye cost $89 and a glass of wine ran $24. Paul had saved for 3 months to afford this dinner on his high school math teacher salary of $58,000 a year. Victoria, who pulled in $180,000 annually as a commercial real estate broker, had forgotten their anniversary until Paul reminded her that morning. She'd shown up 20 minutes late, checking her phone every 30 seconds, her Cartier bracelet, a $12,000 gift from her parents, catching the candlelight as she typed. "I'll have the filet mignon medium rare," Victoria told their waitress without looking up from her iPhone. "And another martini. The 8-ounce or the 12-ounce, ma'am?" The waitress was young, maybe 25, with kind eyes and a name tag that read, Sophie. "The 12-ounce, obviously." Victoria's tone made Sophie flinch. "I'll have the ribeye, medium," Paul said, trying to smile at Sophie. "And thank you." When Sophie returned with their drinks 10 minutes later, she set Victoria's martini down with professional precision, then placed Paul's water glass on the table. As she did, a folded cocktail napkin fell into his lap. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. She gave the smallest nod toward the restrooms, then walked away. Paul waited until Victoria was absorbed in her phone, something about a deal closing tomorrow, before unfolding the napkin. The handwriting was small, urgent, and the words made his blood run cold. "I'm so sorry to do this. Your wife has been coming here every Tuesday and Thursday for 16 months with a man named Richard Hartwell. They sit in booth 12. Last week I overheard them discussing divorce papers and how she's hidden $340,000 in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. She called you a financial anchor and said you'd never see it coming. I have photos. Men's room. 5 minutes. I'm doing this because my dad got destroyed in a divorce. I couldn't watch it happen to someone else without trying to help. Sophie." The napkin trembled in Paul's hands. The restaurant noise, clinking silverware, murmured conversations, smooth jazz, became a distant roar. He looked up at Victoria, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. Her honey blonde hair, professionally styled that morning at a salon that charged $200 per appointment. Her navy blue Armani suit, $1,800, purchased for client meetings. The way she'd stopped saying "we" and started saying "I" sometime in the past year. How she'd insisted Paul wasn't invited to her company holiday party last December because it was just boring real estate talk. "Paul, are you even listening?" Victoria's voice cut through his thoughts. "What?" "I said I might have to fly to San Francisco next week. The Morrison Properties deal. It's worth $4.2 million in commissions." She took a long sip of her martini. "You'll be fine on your own for a few days, right? I know you have that parent-teacher conference thing." Parent-teacher conference thing. She'd stopped remembering the details of his job around the same time she'd stopped wearing her wedding ring, because it catches on paperwork. "Sure," Paul managed. "I'll be fine." "Good God, I'm starving." She glanced around impatiently. "Where's the food?" Paul excused himself to the restroom, his legs unsteady. The men's room was empty except for Sophie, who was standing near the sinks, her phone in her hand. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately. "I debated for weeks whether to tell you, but I waited tables through college specifically to pay for law school, and I've seen what happens when one spouse hides assets. My dad lost everything, his house, his retirement, everything, Because my mom's lawyer was 3 steps ahead and he never saw it coming. She showed Paul her phone, photo after photo. Victoria and a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, laughing over wine. Victoria and the same man, holding hands across the table. Victoria and the man kissing in the parking lot beside a black Mercedes S-Class, approximately $115,000. The timestamps span from June 2022 to just last week, November 14th, 2023. That's Richard Hartwell, Sophie explained. He owns Hartwell Commercial Properties, worth about $23 million according to Denver Business Journal. He comes in here all the time, tips exactly 15% every time, and treats the staff like we're invisible. She swiped to another photo. This one's from last Tuesday. In the image, Victoria and Richard sat in a corner booth, papers spread between them. Sophie zoomed in. Paul could make out letterhead. Davidson and Klein, attorneys at law. I couldn't hear everything, Sophie continued, but I heard her say she'd been moving money into an account he helped her set up. She said something about at least $340,000 so far, and that you'd signed some papers without reading them carefully. Something about a business investment you thought was legitimate? Paul's mind raced backward. 8 months ago, Victoria had brought home documents about investing in a property development deal. It's through my firm, she'd said, completely legitimate. We both sign, we both benefit. It's a spousal investment LLC. He'd trusted her. He'd signed. There's more, Sophie said quietly. 2 weeks ago, I heard them talking about the divorce timeline. She said she was planning to file in January, right after the holidays, because it would look better if she at least pretended to try through Christmas. She said her attorney told her that Colorado is an equitable distribution state, but with the right documentation, she could prove most of the assets were hers alone. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded betrayal and shocking financial deception, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. And tell me where you're watching from. Paul leaned against the sink, his reflection in the mirror showing a man who suddenly looked 10 years older. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Because I watched my dad lose his house, his savings, and nearly lose his will to live, Sophie said, her voice breaking slightly. He was a music teacher, made $52,000 a year. My mom was a pharmaceutical sales rep, making $160,000. Sound familiar? She paused. When they divorced, he discovered she'd been hiding money for 3 years. She got the house, a $580,000 property in Boulder, the cars, everything. He ended up in a 1-bedroom apartment, eating ramen, working 2 jobs just to make child support payments. I was 17. I saw what it did to him. She pulled out a small USB drive from her apron pocket. I copied all the photos here. Dates, timestamps, everything. I also wrote down every conversation I overheard, with dates and times. Take it. Get a lawyer before she files. A good one. Not some $200 an hour general practice attorney. You need a shark who specializes in hidden assets and complex divorces. Paul took the USB drive, his hands shaking. I can't afford that kind of lawyer. Not on my salary. My law school roommate is Cassandra Martinez. She graduated top of her class at Denver Law, works at Preston and Associates downtown. They handle high net worth divorces and cases involving asset fraud. Her direct line is 720-555-0147. Call her tomorrow, tell her Sophie Brennan sent you, and show her what's on that drive. She'll know what to do. Sophie checked her phone. You need to get back. You've been gone almost 6 minutes. Don't let her get suspicious. How much do I owe you for? You don't owe me anything, Sophie interrupted. Just promise me you'll fight. Don't let her take everything you've worked for. And when this is over, when you've got your life back, maybe send my dad a message. His name is Robert Brennan. He still teaches music at Boulder Creek High School. Let him know that someone won the battle he lost. It might help him heal. Paul nodded, unable to speak. He slipped the USB drive into his pocket and returned to the table, where Victoria was texting furiously, her second martini already half empty. "Took you long enough," she muttered. "Food just arrived." Paul looked down at his $89 ribeye and felt his stomach turn. Across from him, Victoria cut into her $76 filet mignon with the same precision she apparently used to dismantle their marriage. "Everything okay?" she asked, not looking up from her phone. "Everything's fine," Paul said, but he was already doing the math. 7 years of marriage, joint accounts with approximately $127,000. Their townhouse in Capitol Hill, purchased for $465,000, now worth about $620,000, with $280,000 remaining on the mortgage. His retirement account, $89,000. Her retirement account, $340,000, or so the statements claimed. If she'd hidden $340,000, what else had she hidden? What other accounts existed that he didn't know about? How much of their money had she systematically transferred into accounts where his name appeared as a co-investor, but she controlled everything? "You're being weird," Victoria said, finally looking at him. "What's wrong?" Paul picked up his fork. "Just thinking about the San Francisco trip. When are you leaving?" "Tuesday. Back Friday." She smiled, the same smile he'd fallen in love with 9 years ago at a friend's barbecue. "Why? Going to miss me?" "Something like that." What Victoria didn't know was that Paul taught AP calculus and statistics. He spent his days teaching teenagers how to identify patterns, analyze data, and solve complex problems. He'd already started calculating timelines. Tuesday and Thursday dinners for 16 months meant approximately 140 meetings. If each dinner cost $200 minimum, that was $28,000 minimum. Where had that money come from? Not from their joint account. He would have noticed withdrawals that large. She had to have another account, probably several. "I'm exhausted," Victoria announced, pushing her half-eaten steak away. "Can we just get the check and go?" The bill came to $267.89. Paul paid with their joint credit card, the one tied to their shared Chase account. He left Sophie a $60 cash tip, every dollar he had in his wallet, and wrote on the receipt, "Thank you for everything." Sophie met his eyes as they left. She gave him a small, encouraging nod. In the car, Victoria immediately took a phone call. "Richard, hi. Yeah, dinner was fine." Paul was in one of his moods. She laughed at something Richard said. I know, just a few more weeks and then it won't matter." Paul gripped the steering wheel tighter and said nothing. He drove their $32,000 Honda Accord, the practical car they'd bought together 3 years ago, while Victoria chatted with the man she was leaving him for, the man worth $23 million who drove a $115,000 Mercedes. They had no idea what was coming. When they got home to their townhouse on Gilpin Street, Victoria went straight to her home office and closed the door. Through it, Paul could hear her voice, low and intimate, talking to Richard, planning their future, a future that didn't include him. Paul went to his own small office, the room with his teaching materials and stacks of ungraded calculus tests. He plugged in the USB drive, 247 photographs, spreadsheet documents titled Asset Distribution Timeline.xlsx and Marital Property Division.docx. Email screenshots between Victoria and her attorney, Jeremy Klein, discussing strategies to minimize his share and maximize separate property claims. One email, dated October 3rd, 2023, made his hands shake. "Jeremy, per our discussion, I've successfully transferred an additional $75,000 to the Cayman account. Total now $340,000. Paul signed the LLC documents without reading them, as expected. The property investment story worked perfectly. By the time he realizes the investment doesn't exist, we'll have filed and frozen everything. His teaching salary is embarrassing, and the court will see I'm the primary earner. We should be able to argue that most marital assets came from my income and career. Also confirm that Richard is willing to testify about the property development partnership if needed, which gives us cover for the money trail. Paul is too trusting and frankly too stupid to figure any of this out before it's too late. See you Tuesday at 2 p.m. to finalize the January filing timeline. V. Too trusting. Too stupid. Paul stared at those words for a long time. He wasn't stupid. He had a master's degree in mathematics from the University of Colorado. He taught kids how to think critically and solve problems. But he'd been blinded by love, by trust, by the belief that his wife was his partner. That ended tonight. He picked up his phone and dialed the number Sophie had given him. It rang 4 times before someone answered. This is Cassandra Martinez. Ms. Martinez, my name is Paul Stroud. Sophie Brennan told me to call you. I need a lawyer who specializes in hidden assets and divorce fraud. And I need one tonight. There was a pause. Sophie Brennan? Bobby Brennan's daughter? Yes. Where are you right now? Home, but my wife doesn't know I know anything yet. Good, keep it that way. Don't change your behavior. Don't let her suspect anything. Can you meet me at my office tomorrow morning? 6 a.m. before you go to work. Preston and Associates, 1801 California Street, Suite 4200. I'll be there. Bring everything. Bank statements, investment documents, anything you've signed in the last 2 years. And bring whatever Sophie gave you. I will. Dr. Stroud, one more thing. Don't underestimate what you're up against. If your wife has been planning this for 18 months, she's got a strategy. But here's what she doesn't know. I love destroying strategies. I'll see you tomorrow at 6 a.m. sharp. Paul hung up and sat in the darkness of his office. Down the hall, he could still hear Victoria laughing with Richard, planning Paul's destruction, celebrating her brilliant scheme. She thought she was 3 moves ahead. She had no idea he'd just learned the entire playbook. Tomorrow, the real game would begin, and Paul Stroud, high school math teacher with a $58,000 salary, was about to teach his $180,000 earning wife a lesson in consequences. Paul arrived at Preston and Associates at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes early, carrying a weathered backpack filled with 7 years of financial documents. The office occupied the entire 42nd floor of a gleaming downtown tower with views of the Rocky Mountains. The reception area alone probably cost more than his annual salary to furnish. Cassandra Martinez met him personally at the elevator. She was maybe 40, wearing a charcoal gray suit that screamed competence, and a silver watch that Paul recognized as an Omega Seamaster, approximately $6,500. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp and assessing. Coffee? She offered, leading him to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows. Please. She poured 2 cups from an expensive-looking machine. Sophie called me last night after you did, told me what she witnessed. Her father, Bobby, is one of my favorite people on this planet. What happened to him shouldn't happen to anyone. She sat across from Paul. So let's make sure it doesn't happen to you. Show me everything. Paul spent the next 90 minutes walking through 7 years of marriage. Cassandra took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally stopping him to ask questions that revealed just how thoroughly Victoria had been preparing. This LLC document, Cassandra said, holding up the papers Victoria had brought home 8 months ago. Pinnacle Development Investments, LLC. You signed as a member. But look at this clause here, paragraph 12.4. In the event of dissolution of marriage, all member interests vest solely with the member whose name appears first on the articles of organization. Whose name appears first? Paul felt sick. Victoria's. Exactly. You signed away your interest in a company that supposedly doesn't exist, according to these emails, but legally does exist for the purpose of holding money. Money that came from marital funds, but is now structured as her separate property. Cassandra made a note. This is sophisticated. She didn't draft this herself. Her attorney helped her build this trap, and you walked right into it. How much trouble am I in? On a scale of 1 to 10? 7. But here's the good news. She made mistakes. She got arrogant. Cassandra pulled out her laptop. First, Colorado is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. That means the court divides assets fairly, not necessarily equally. Second, fraudulent concealment of assets is illegal. If we can prove she intentionally hid money with the intent to defraud you in a divorce, the court will not look kindly on that. Can we prove it? Can we prove it? Cassandra smiled, and Paul saw why she'd graduated top of her class. Mr. Stroud, she literally wrote in an email that you were too stupid to figure it out. That's not going to play well in front of Judge Morrison, who happens to preside over most high-asset divorce cases in Denver District Court, and who has very strong feelings about asset fraud. She opened a file. Here's what we're going to do. Today is Friday. You said Victoria is flying to San Francisco on Tuesday? That's what she said. Perfect. While she's gone, we're going to do something called forensic accounting. I have an investigator, Michael Torres, who specializes in finding hidden money. He's expensive, $350 per hour, but he's worth every penny. We're also going to file for an emergency motion to freeze all marital assets, but we're going to time it perfectly. I can't afford $350 an hour, Paul said quietly. I can barely afford you. Our firm handles some cases on contingency for asset fraud. If we win and recover hidden assets, we take 30% of what we find beyond the standard marital split. You don't pay unless we find money. And trust me, Mr. Stroud, we're going to find money. She leaned forward. Your wife thinks you're a pushover. She thinks you'll roll over and accept whatever she offers. That's her mistake. We're going to use her arrogance against her. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have not, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And drop a comment below telling me what you think Paul should do next. Over the next 4 days, Paul lived a double life. At school, he taught AP Calculus, graded papers, and met with parents about their children's progress. At home, he was the same husband Victoria expected, quiet, unassuming, easy to ignore. She didn't notice that he'd started documenting everything: what time she came home, who she called, every mention of Richard or business trips. Victoria left for San Francisco on Tuesday morning. Paul drove her to Denver International Airport at 6 a.m. I'll miss you, he said, kissing her cheek. She barely looked at him, already texting. I'll be back Friday. There's leftover Thai food in the fridge. Have a safe flight. The moment her plane took off at 7:35 a.m., Paul called Cassandra. She's gone. Excellent. Meet Michael Torres at your house in 1 hour. He's going to need access to her home office and all her computers. Michael Torres was a former FBI forensic accountant who now made $280,000 a year helping divorce lawyers find hidden money. He arrived at Paul's townhouse with 2 large equipment cases and a tablet. Standard procedure, Michael explained, setting up in Victoria's office. I'm going to image her computer hard drive, clone her phone if she left an old one anywhere, and go through every document in this office. We're looking for account statements, passwords, correspondence with her attorney, anything that shows where money went. Is this legal? Paul asked. It's your marital residence, your marital property, and she's your wife. In Colorado, you have a legal right to access marital financial information. We're not hacking anything, we're just looking at what's already here. It took Michael 6 hours. When he finished, he had filled 3 USB drives with data and had a preliminary report that made Paul's blood boil. Your wife is extremely organized, Michael said. Almost too organized. She kept spreadsheets detailing every transfer. Look at this. He showed Paul a spreadsheet titled Asset Protection Timeline.xlsx. It detailed transfers going back 23 months. June 2022, $15,000 to Pinnacle Development LLC. July 2022, $22,000 to Pinnacle Development LLC. August 2022, $18,000 to Pinnacle Development LLC. September 2022, $25,000 to Cayman International Bank, account number 847293. The list continued month after month until it reached $340,000, exactly as the email had stated. But here's where it gets interesting, Michael continued. These transfers all came from your joint investment account at Charles Schwab. She was slowly draining it, assuming you never checked the balance because she handled the investments. Paul felt like an idiot. She'd always said she was better with money, that she'd manage their investments. He'd trusted her. There's more, Michael said. I found correspondence between her and Richard Hartwell. They're not just having an affair, they're business partners. Hartwell Commercial Powers is buying a development site in Fort Collins for $8.7 million. Your wife invested $340,000 as a limited partner, except she used marital funds to buy into a business deal that's solely in her name. Can we get that money back? Not just back. We can get her crucified in court. Using marital funds for separate business ventures without spousal consent is a major violation. Judge Morrison awarded triple damages in a similar case last year, Hendricks versus Hendricks. The husband hid $200,000 in a business deal. The wife got $600,000 plus attorney fees. Paul did the math. Triple damages on $340,000 was $1,020,000. She doesn't have that kind of money, he said. No, but Richard Hartwell does. And if we can prove he knowingly participated in helping her hide marital assets, he becomes liable too. Corporate veil piercing. His company, his personal assets, all fair game. That evening, Paul called Cassandra with an update. She listened to Michael's findings and went silent for a moment. Mr. Stroud, I think we need to accelerate our timeline. I'm going to file an emergency motion Thursday morning while she's still in San Francisco. We're going to freeze everything, bank accounts, investment accounts, the Cayman account if we can reach it, and we're going to put a lien on the Fort Collins property investment. She's going to land Friday afternoon and discover her entire financial life is frozen. Won't that make her angry? Furious, but anger makes people careless, and we need her careless because we still don't know if there are other accounts. Michael found $340,000. I'd bet money there's more. Cassandra was right. On Thursday morning, while Victoria was touring properties in San Francisco with Richard, Paul knew because she'd posted photos on Instagram. Cassandra filed a 47-page emergency motion in Denver District Court. The motion included evidence of the $340,000 in hidden transfers, copies of emails discussing asset concealment, the fraudulent LLC documents, expert testimony from Michael Torres, Sophie's photographs and written timeline, a request to freeze all assets pending full forensic audit, a request for sanctions against Victoria's attorney for participating in fraud. Judge Morrison granted the motion at 2:30 p.m. By 3 p.m., every account Victoria controlled was frozen. The joint Chase account, frozen. The Charles Schwab investment account, frozen. Her individual Bank of America account, frozen. The Cayman account would take longer, but Cassandra had already contacted international asset recovery specialists. The Fort Collins property deal closes Monday, Cassandra told Paul Thursday evening, except it's not going to close because we put a lien on it this afternoon. Hartwell Commercial Properties can't complete the purchase without clear title to all investor funds. Your wife's $340,000 just became a $340,000 paperweight that's blocking an $8.7 million deal. What happens when Richard finds out? That's where it gets fun, Cassandra said, and Paul could hear the smile in her voice. Richard Hartwell is a businessman. He didn't become worth $23 million by being stupid. When he discovers that his mistress's marital drama is tanking his largest deal of the year, he's going to make a choice. And I guarantee that choice won't be standing by your wife. Victoria's plane landed at Denver International Airport at 4:47 p.m. on Friday. Paul knew because he tracked it online. She'd texted him, "Landed, getting an Uber, be home in an hour." Paul sat in their living room, waiting. Cassandra had advised him to stay calm, document everything, and avoid confrontation. Victoria walked in at 6:15 p.m., rolling her carry-on suitcase. She looked exhausted and distracted. "Hey," she said, barely glancing at him, "I need to make some calls." She went straight to her office. Paul heard her boot up her computer, heard the click of her mouse, and then heard the sound he'd been waiting for. "What the fuck?" Victoria burst out of her office, her face pale, her phone in her hand. "Paul, something's wrong with the bank accounts. They're all frozen. There's some kind of court order. Do you know anything about this?" Paul looked at his wife, the woman he'd loved for 9 years, married for 7, trusted with everything, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "I know everything, Victoria. I know about Richard. I know about the $340,000. I know about the Cayman account. I know about the Fort Collins property deal. I know you've been planning to divorce me since at least June 2022. I know you called me too stupid to figure it out." He stood up. "Turns out I'm smarter than you thought." Her face went through several emotions in rapid succession: shock, fear, anger, and finally, calculation. "I don't know what you think you know, but I have emails, Victoria. Your emails to Jeremy Klein. I have the spreadsheets. I have photos of you and Richard at the Sterling Oak every Tuesday and Thursday for 16 months. I have testimony from witnesses. I have forensic evidence of $340,000 in fraudulent transfers. And as of 2:30 p.m. yesterday, I have a court order freezing every asset you control pending a full investigation." She sat down heavily on the couch. "How did you? Who told you? Does it matter?" Her phone rang. She looked at the screen, Richard calling, and didn't answer. It rang again, and again. She turned it off. "We can work this out," she said finally. "Paul, I made mistakes, but we can—" "No." Paul's voice was steady. "We're done. You spent 18 months planning my destruction. You stole from our marriage. You committed fraud. And you were so confident I'd never figure it out that you documented everything." He picked up his own bag. He'd packed it that morning. "I'm staying at a hotel. My attorney is Cassandra Martinez at Preston and Associates. All communication goes through her. Don't contact me directly. Don't come to my school. Don't try to touch any assets because they're all frozen." "Paul, please." 7 years, Victoria. I gave you 7 years of loyalty and love and trust. You repaid me by treating me like I was worthless. He headed for the door. "You wanted a divorce? Congratulations. You're getting one, just not the one you planned." He left her sitting in their living room, her phone buzzing with ignored calls from Richard, her carefully constructed plan in ruins. As Paul drove away from the townhouse on Gilpin Street for what would be the last time as a married man, he felt something unexpected. Not sadness, but relief. The weight of living a lie, even though he hadn't known it was a lie, lifted. His phone rang. Cassandra Martinez. "How did it go?" "She knows." "Good. Now here's what happens next. Monday morning, 9 a.m., we're sitting down with her attorney, Jeremy Klein. We're going to give them a choice. Settle this quickly and fairly, or go to trial and face sanctions for fraud. Either way, you're going to walk away with more than half the marital assets, plus damages." "What about the Fort Collins deal?" "Richard Hartwell's attorney called me an hour ago. The deal is in jeopardy. Hartwell stands to lose $2.1 million in earnest money if they can't close Monday. He wants the lien lifted. I told him we'd consider it if he provides full documentation of Victoria's investment and confirms it was made with marital funds. He agreed to cooperate fully. Paul couldn't help but smile. He's turning on her. Faster than a rat leaving a sinking ship. Men like Hartwell don't risk millions for romance. He's already calculating how to minimize his exposure. By Monday morning, your wife is going to be very alone. That night, in a Hampton Inn off I-25, Paul lay in an uncomfortable bed and thought about Sophie Brennan. A waitress he'd never met before had risked her job, possibly legal trouble, to save a stranger from financial ruin. Because she'd watched her father suffer and couldn't stand to watch it happen again. He thought about calling Sophie, thanking her, but decided to wait. First, he'd finish this. Then he'd thank her properly. And he'd reach out to her father, Bobby Brennan, the music teacher at Boulder Creek High School who'd lost everything. He'd tell Bobby that this time, the good guy won. But Paul's battle was far from over. Victoria wasn't the type to surrender easily. And somewhere in San Francisco, Richard Hartwell was making his own calculations about how to protect his $23 million fortune. The real fight was about to begin. Monday morning arrived with fresh snow blanketing Denver, the kind of heavy, wet November snow that made the city look clean and new. Paul stood outside the Preston and Associates conference room at 8:47 a.m., watching Victoria and her attorney Jeremy Klein through the glass wall. Klein was exactly what Paul had imagined. Mid-50s, expensive suit, probably a Brioni worth $4,500, and the practiced arrogance of a man who'd spent 20 years winning by intimidation. Victoria looked terrible. Her normally perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer outfits. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her phone sat on the table in front of her, face down, silent. Cassandra appeared beside Paul, carrying a leather portfolio. Ready? Ready. They walked in together. The conference room seated 12, but felt intimate and tense with just the 5 of them. Paul, Cassandra, Michael Torres, the forensic accountant, Victoria, and Jeremy Klein. Let's skip the pleasantries, Cassandra began, settling into her chair. Mr. Klein, you've had the weekend to review the evidence we submitted with our emergency motion. You've seen the emails, the photographs, the financial records, and the expert analysis. So let's talk about what happens next. Klein adjusted his Hermes tie, $295. Ms. Martinez, I think your client is overreaching. My client made some investments that— Your client committed fraud, Cassandra interrupted. And you helped her do it. That LLC document? The one where Mr. Stroud signed away his interest in paragraph 12.4? That's fraudulent inducement. You drafted a document designed to look like a joint investment vehicle while actually being a tool to strip marital assets. In Colorado, that's grounds for sanctions against an attorney. You could lose your license. Klein's face reddened. You have no proof I knew. We have an email from October 3rd where Ms. Stroud tells you her husband is too stupid to figure it out, and you respond, quote, that's why we structured it this way. Just make sure he doesn't ask too many questions before signing, end quote. Cassandra slid a printout across the table. That's consciousness of guilt, Mr. Klein. That's conspiracy to commit fraud. That's you becoming a defendant instead of an attorney. Victoria stared at the table. Klein's face went from red to pale. Here's our offer, Cassandra continued. Ms. Stroud will return all hidden assets, the $340,000 plus whatever else Mr. Torres finds in his complete audit. She will pay Mr. Stroud's attorney fees, which currently stand at $37,500. She will surrender her interest in the Gilpin Street townhouse, valued at $340,000 in equity. In exchange, we won't pursue criminal fraud charges. We won't pursue sanctions against you, Mr. Klein, and will allow the Fort Collins property deal to proceed. That's insane, Klein sputtered. You're asking for everything. No, we're asking for what she tried to steal plus consequences. Everything would be pursuing triple damages under Hendricks v. Hendricks precedent, which would mean $1,020,000 plus the townhouse, plus attorney fees, plus sanctions. We're being generous. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Paul's situation. Victoria finally spoke, her voice hoarse. I don't have $340,000 in cash. It's all in the Fort Collins deal. Then Mr. Hartwell needs to return it, Cassandra said simply. His attorney has already agreed to cooperate fully. He'll wire the $340,000 to an escrow account today if we lift the lien. He's choosing his $8.7 million deal over you, Miss Stroud. I suggest you accept that reality. What about Richard? Victoria asked, and Paul heard something in her voice he'd never heard before. Genuine fear. What about us? Cassandra pulled out her phone and played a voicemail. Richard Hartwell's voice filled the room. Victoria, this is Richard. My attorneys tell me your marital situation has created a massive liability for my company. The Fort Collins deal is at risk, and I've got investors threatening to pull out. I can't be associated with this. I think it's best if we don't see each other anymore. My lawyer will be in touch about returning your investment. Please don't contact me again. The message had been left Saturday night at 11:47 p.m. Victoria's face crumpled. He was going to enjoy your company until it became inconvenient, Cassandra said, not unkindly. Men worth $23 million don't risk their fortunes for love affairs, Miss Stroud. You were convenient and expensive and complicated. Paul watched his wife realize she'd lost everything. Richard was gone. Her scheme had failed. Her attorney was facing sanctions. Her accounts were frozen. The $340,000 she'd hidden so carefully was about to be returned. And Paul, quiet, trusting Paul, had outplayed her completely. I need to consult with my client, Klein said weakly. You have until 5 p.m. today, Cassandra responded. After that, we file additional motions for sanctions and refer the matter to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. Fraud over $100,000 is a Class 3 felony in Colorado, Mr. Klein. That's 4 to 12 years in prison. They left Victoria and Klein in the conference room. In the hallway, Paul exhaled shakily. That was brutal, he said. That was justice, Cassandra corrected. She tried to rob you of 7 years of savings, your home, and your dignity. All we did was expose the truth. At 4:32 p.m., Klein called. We accept your terms. The settlement was finalized over the next 2 weeks. Richard Hartwell's company wired $340,000 to an escrow account managed by the court. Victoria signed a quit-claim deed for the townhouse. She paid Paul's legal fees from her remaining liquid assets. The divorce was uncontested, finalized in 60 days, a Colorado record for a high-asset case. But the story didn't end there. Michael Torres completed his full forensic audit and discovered another $127,000 in a different offshore account, this one in Panama. Victoria had been even busier than anyone realized. The additional discovery meant she owed Paul another $127,000, which she had to borrow from her parents. Her father, Thomas Stroud, a retired surgeon worth $3.2 million, was reportedly furious at his daughter's behavior. Victoria's career suffered too. Word spread in Denver's tight-knit commercial real estate community about the fraud case. Clients began requesting different brokers. Her firm, Morrison Properties, quietly let her go in January 2024. Last Paul heard, she was working for a small residential agency in Aurora, making maybe $45,000 a year. Jeremy Klein faced an ethics hearing with the Colorado Supreme Court Attorney Regulation Council. He received a 6-month suspension and a $50,000 fine for his role in drafting fraudulent documents. His reputation never recovered. Richard Hartwell's Fort Collins deal closed, but the scandal cost him. Two major investors pulled out, citing concerns about his judgment. The development proceeded, but on a smaller scale. Hartwell avoided legal liability, but Paul heard through Sophie that he'd lost approximately $4.5 million in projected profits because of the delays and investor withdrawals. As for Paul, he kept the townhouse, now worth $640,000 with the mortgage paid down. He'd received $467,000 in returned assets, the original $340,000, the Panama account $127,000. After paying off the remaining $260,000 mortgage and his legal fees, he had approximately $207,000 in cash. He invested it wisely, continued teaching, and discovered he genuinely loved his life without Victoria. His students noticed he seemed lighter, happier. He started coaching the math team again, something he'd stopped doing 3 years ago when Victoria said it took too much time away from their marriage. In March 2024, Paul drove to Boulder Creek High School during his spring break. He found Bobby Brennan in the music room, conducting after-school jazz band practice. Paul waited until practice ended, then introduced himself. "You're Sophie's dad?" Bobby Brennan was in his late 50s, with kind eyes exactly like his daughter's. "I am. Can I help you?" "Your daughter Sophie saved my life last November. She worked as a waitress at the Sterling Oak, and she saw my wife with another man, planning to hide assets and destroy me financially. Sophie gave me evidence, connected me with a lawyer, and helped me fight back. I won because of her courage." Bobby's eyes filled with tears. "She didn't tell me she'd done that." "She did it because of what happened to you. She watched you suffer through a divorce where you lost everything, and she couldn't let it happen to someone else." Paul pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I wanted you to know that this time, we won. The teacher didn't lose his house or his savings. The teacher got justice, because your daughter was brave enough to intervene." Inside the envelope was a check for $25,000 and a letter explaining everything that had happened. "I can't accept this," Bobby said, though his hands trembled holding the check. "You already did. That money represents recovered assets that I wouldn't have without Sophie. She refused any reward, so I'm giving it to the person who made her into someone willing to take that risk. Use it however you want. Pay off debt, take a vacation, donate it, whatever brings you peace." Bobby broke down crying. Paul learned later that Bobby had been drowning in credit card debt from the divorce, almost $34,000, and the money cleared it entirely. In April, Paul met Sophie for coffee at a shop near DU Law School, where she was finishing her final semester. "You changed my life," he told her simply. "Why did you really do it?" Sophie stirred her latte, thinking, "I watched my dad become a ghost of himself after the divorce. He loved my mom, trusted her completely, and she destroyed him. He had to sell his Chevy Tahoe, $28,000 that he'd saved for years to buy. He moved to an apartment that cost $950 a month and ate ramen so he could afford child support. I watched him cry at night when he thought I couldn't hear." She looked up at Paul. "When I saw you at that restaurant, looking at your wife with so much love while she plotted your destruction, I saw my dad. And I thought, not this time. This time someone's going to know the truth before it's too late. Even if it costs me my job, which it didn't, thankfully, it was worth it." "You're going to be an amazing lawyer," Paul said. "I hope so. I want to help people like you and my dad. People who play by the rules and get crushed by people who don't." She smiled. "Cassandra offered me a job at her firm when I graduate. I accepted." Paul wasn't surprised. Cassandra recognized a kindred spirit. In May 2024, 6 months after that dinner at the Sterling Oak, Paul ran into Victoria at a King Soopers grocery store in Capitol Hill. She was alone, pushing a cart with basics: pasta, canned sauce, cheap wine. She'd lost weight. Her clothes were from Target, not Neiman. "Paul." "Hello, Paul," she said quietly. "Victoria." They stood in the pasta aisle, two people who'd once promised forever. "I wanted to apologize," she said. "I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I was wrong. I was greedy and selfish, and I hurt someone who never deserved it. I threw away 7 good years because I wanted more. More money, more status, more excitement. And I lost everything that actually mattered." Paul looked at the woman he'd once loved and felt pity. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just sadness for what she'd become. "I forgive you," he said, surprising himself. "Not because what you did was okay, but because carrying anger around isn't worth it. You paid the price for your choices. That's enough." "Are you happy?" she asked. "Yeah, actually, I am. Teaching, grading papers, coaching math team, living alone in a townhouse I actually own. It's a good life. Turns out I didn't need the fancy dinners and the keeping up with everyone else stress. I just needed to be appreciated. And now I appreciate myself." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry I couldn't see your worth." "Me too. Take care of yourself, Victoria." He walked away, leaving his ex-wife in the grocery store, and realized he meant what he'd said. He'd forgiven her. Not because she deserved it, but because he deserved peace. That evening, Paul sat on his back deck, his deck now, fully paid for, watching the sun set behind the mountains. His phone buzzed with a text from his brother Daniel, inviting him to a family barbecue. His mom wanted to see him. His niece missed her uncle. Paul had spent so many years putting Victoria first, skipping family events because she found them boring, missing his nephew's birthday parties because she had work functions. Now he could say yes to everything that mattered. He'd learned something profound through all of this. Sometimes betrayal is a gift. It removes people who don't deserve you and makes space for people who do. Victoria's scheme had destroyed their marriage, but it had freed Paul to build a life he actually wanted. The waitress who'd slipped him that napkin hadn't just saved his assets, she'd saved his future. And on quiet nights like this, when the world felt right again, Paul understood the deepest lesson of all. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's letting people face the natural consequences of their own actions while you build something better. Victoria had wanted to destroy him to elevate herself. Instead, she destroyed herself while he'd risen from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and genuinely happy. Justice doesn't always look like courtroom victories and financial settlements. Sometimes it looks like a middle-aged math teacher sitting on a deck he owns, drinking coffee he can afford, planning a life he actually wants to live, surrounded by people who genuinely love him. That's the ending Victoria never saw coming, and that's the ending Paul would choose every single time. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.